As the new season begins, three big stories have been dominating the headlines with no resolution in sight. Juvenile crime.
The system makes no sense.
And questions about the juvenile justice system. The Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project.
It's our property rights and our way of life, being at risk.
And the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
I'm defending the rights of this man to due process.
I think I got plenty of due process.
I'm going in depth on all three issues, examining how we got here and looking at what to expect in the coming weeks. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. We're taking a look at several stories we've covered over the past few months. The immigration debate is still drawing national attention, with Maryland in the spotlight over the Trump administration's deportation of Salvadorian native Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The Trump administration doubling down on claims Abrego Garcia is a criminal affiliated with the MS-13 gang as Democrats push for his return to the United States. Landowners continue to fight the controversial Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project. The developers behind the transmission line trying to gain access to private property, the latest in the months-long legal saga. And as juvenile crime continues across the state, we're taking a closer look at a failed proposal during this year's legislative session to start nearly all juvenile cases in the juvenile court system. Now, Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says he's gearing up for another fight next year to make sure that plan does not resurface. The Legislative Black Caucus backed a plan called the Yes Act in Annapolis. It would essentially flip the current system, requiring prosecutors to petition the court to waive young offenders down to juvenile court. Supporters like Senator Will Smith say it's about public safety.
You're going to get better public safety outcomes when you get used the services and the supports that they need so that they don't recidivate.
Senator Smith is not only a member of the Legislative Black Caucus
here in the Judicial Proceedings Committee,
but chair of the powerful Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. Despite his support and the effort from the caucus, the plan failed to gain enough traction. Throughout session,
we know that the Department of Juvenile Services right now does not have enough resources.
Prosecutors pushed back, largely arguing DJS simply could not handle the influx of cases and added responsibility that could come along with the law change.
DJS's cup overfloweth right now.
Fast forward less than a year.
I have no doubt it will come up again.
City State's Attorney Ivan Bates is gearing up to fight against the plan again next session.
But I think it's very misguided at this time. It sounds great. I'm with everybody. Look, I'm a black man. Don't want to lock up black and brown children. Don't want to do that. But what I also realize, you're missing that there are black and brown victims. They're all victims. But let's just look at direct file right now. Direct file would mean that each and every single case involving a juvenile would start in the juvenile system. The problem is DJS and juvenile system's broken. They're not prepared to handle those cases.
Bates argues the Department of Juvenile Services only has one hardwired detention facility and is not capable of detaining juveniles with more serious convictions like murder. And then Bates says there is the issue of transparency within DJS.
So let's look at this. Say there's a juvenile, we have direct file. There's a juvenile and they're in the juvenile system. Well, no one is allowed to know what's going on. So whatever the judge does, no one knows. It's secretive. Everything else in every other system, there are checks and balances. Is the Black Caucus prepared to then sit down and say, we're going to go ahead and take the veil off of the juvenile system so everybody can see what's happening, what's going on, so we can see what the judges are doing, so we can see what programs are really happening? Are we prepared to do that? The answer to that's going to be no. Unless you're prepared to probably drop $50, $100 million into DJS's hands to sit down and reconfigure all the programs to say when we have young people that commit murder, what are you going to do for the sex offender? The sex offender has a 2-month program. So what are we going to do? We're going to send them right back to their school? I mean, what does this look like? It's misguided in the sense that it's not thought out properly. I totally understand the want, I understand the need, and I understand the desire. But now is just not the time.
Supporters of the plan argued cases could still be moved up to the adult system if prosecutors asked to do so. Wouldn't they be able to waive up or petition to waive up?
Well, they could, but the problem is very difficult because now the onus is on the state. There's a case called Davis that came out, and it pretty much says that is there a program for this youth? And if there's a program, then you can more or less try to say that this youth should stay in the juvenile system because there's a program for them. And so, once again, we don't know what the judges are doing, because you have a judge who says, I believe all juveniles should only be in juvenile court. Then no juveniles will ever come. It's a system that, what's the checks and balances? Where's the accountability?
It's not clear if leadership will change their minds next year and allow the plan to move forward, but it is clear prosecutors like Bates have not changed their minds to support the plan. I reached out to the Legislative Black Caucus multiple times to get a comment in response to Bates, but I did not hear back. Residents impacted by juvenile crime are also speaking out against DJS, arguing the department is not doing enough to hold young people accountable. One of those residents is an Otterbein woman who says a group of juveniles attacked her as she got out of her vehicle, punching her in the jaw and attempting to rob her. A 17-year-old girl was arrested and released on an ankle monitor. Sources tell Fox 45 News that teen has a history with law enforcement stretching back years, leaving her latest victim with more questions than answers.
When you repeat robbery and when you injure someone that heinously, it's, I don't really understand why they would let them go, or, why there isn't any more stricter laws against that.
And in Howard County, police say 69-year-old Bonnie Griffith was killed when 4 juveniles crashed a stolen car into her vehicle. A 16-year-old was arrested and charged, but 3 teens are still on the run. Neighbors and witnesses echo calls for accountability.
I like to see him arrested, and whatever the penalty is for that, he should get the full thing.
So how long is it going to take? And what's going to change?
Brazen juvenile crimes like these are not new. Last fall, the brutal assault of a 66-year-old in Butchers Hill was caught on camera. One of the suspects, just 15 years old, was released to his guardians. The incident sparked a petition calling for Secretary Schiraldi's removal as head of DJS. Thousands of people signed, including community activist Arch McCowan.
I think that, each person signing it, they are showing that, they have skin in the game and they want to affect a change. I think that looking at his track record, looking at what he's all about, I think Vinny Schiraldi just does not get the public safety aspect of his agency.
Following that attack, Republican lawmakers also wrote 2 letters demanding Governor Westmore replace Schiraldi. They've since written a 3rd letter reiterating that demand after a damning audit found major systemic failures inside the department.
We've just seen a very consistent, what appears to be just neglect of duty. This, I think, is our 3rd call for the resignation, and it's based on the fact that a nonpartisan, independent audit found that they're not even doing routine background checks for these individuals that are working with children in these facilities. It's unacceptable.
Schiraldi largely dodging responsibility for the audit, blaming many of the issues on the previous administration. But Delegate William Valentine from the Judicial Proceedings Committee says Schiraldi should have worked harder to oversee his agency.
In my opinion, I believe that there seems to be a lack of urgency on Secretary Schiraldi's of some of his comments and some of his actions. When you look at some of these audits, these are things that go back to 23. I know he's mentioned that some of this was from a previous administration, but when you look at this, these are occurring on his watch.
Still to come, local landowners pushing back against a court filing they say violates their property rights, while the developers behind the controversial Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project are trying to gain access to private land. The legal battle continues between landowners and the developers behind the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project. That's a controversial 70-mile transmission line spanning 3 Maryland counties. A judge will soon decide whether PSEG can send environmental surveyors onto private property as farmers and homeowners push back. Fox 45's Jessica Babb has been following this story since the beginning and walks us through how we got here.
As the energy crisis looms over Maryland, the state is caught at a crossroads, keeping the lights on while balancing the needs and rights of residents.
It's our property rights and our, way of life, being at risk.
At the federal courthouse in Baltimore, it's a controversy playing out in real time.
The larger issue here is why should Marylanders have to give up their private property to enrich a New Jersey utility to further enrich data centers in Virginia? And we say no.
Take your power station and go to West Virginia.
Hundreds of residents in Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick County saying no to a proposed 67-mile high-voltage transmission line. And they're saying no to a lawsuit where the developers are trying to access private property along the route.
People across Maryland know this project will not serve Maryland, and if we need to stand in the way, then we'll continue to stand in the way.
The developers' Public Service Enterprise Group say without the transmission line up and running by June 2027, the electric grid could be at risk, and residents could see rolling brownouts and blackouts. Attorneys for PSEG describe a grim outlook as the demand for electricity continues to grow, especially since Maryland already imports about 40% of its energy from other states.
The bottom line is the energy outlook in the state of Maryland is dire.
We believe that in order to maintain a reliable grid, new infrastructure in this state is desperately needed.
But since PSEG acknowledges data centers are driving the demand, residents like Charlie Bond, who argue the line won't benefit Maryland, are now watching and waiting.
They're asking for something really aggressive here that's beyond really what should be granted to a private company.
They appreciate me and I appreciate them.
Farmers like Melvin Bale Jr.
If I don't have the land, I'm not a farmer. In the traditional sense, and the way that I've it's my life, and without the land, it's destroying it. The family farm has been the farm has been the family name for 95 years.
Say the transmission project traipsing through threatens their land and livelihood.
There's so many issues that I'm very concerned about that I don't see how they can mitigate. If it was going to benefit the greater community, the good of the greater community, I would understand that, but it doesn't. This would not be needed without the data centers.
Governor Wes Moore last year voicing his grave concerns.
I still am not certain what the benefit is to Marylanders, and I'm going to stand with the people on this.
So how did we get to this point where it could be argued a transmission line could make it or break it for Maryland? For years, state leaders have been focused on creating clean and renewable energy, reducing emissions, and making sure more electric vehicles hit the road, passing the Climate Solutions Now Act in 2022. But with renewables like solar only producing a small fraction of the state's energy. Now that coal plants want to close, there's simply not enough energy to go around.
We don't have our own power in the state for the most part. That's what's killing us all. It sounded good in the campaign. Oh, by 2030, we're going to be all renewable. But the fact of it is they had no way of doing it.
The state's dire outlook leading to higher energy costs, with residents seeing their energy bills dramatically rise.
It's like making a decision of, do I eat or do I pay my bills, So I got to eat to live, but I also need a roof over my head.
It becomes debilitating.
Prompting leaders to take action.
We have to provide a path towards more Maryland-made energy.
But now that the legislative session has officially wrapped up, many Democrats are touting the new energy policies just signed into law.
This year, we passed the most substantive energy affordability package that Maryland has seen in several decades.
While Senate President Bill Ferguson says they'll accelerate the development of cleaner in-state energy, make sure data centers pay their fair share, provide a path forward for battery and energy storage, and provide relief to ratepayers.
It represents a real missed opportunity.
Republicans argue it doesn't go far enough to address the root cause of the crisis.
There's been a couple things in those bills that may be somewhat helpful in getting long-term more energy generation in the nuclear space, but for the most part, it was a lot more of the giveaways to the solar industry and really very little, if any, progress on bringing natural gas energy production back in the state that will really actually help solve our energy production shortage.
And even though Governor Wes Moore agrees we need to improve the state's energy planning process, he just vetoed 2 bills that could lead to more of that comprehensive planning. One of the bills was designed to study the impacts of data centers.
I'm very disappointed. I think it was a very important bill. In fact, I identified it as my most important bill of the session. Frederick County is going to be the home for data center development, and I fully support that, but we need to get it right. We need to really quantify the numbers and make sure the juice is worth the squeeze, and we need to understand for our citizens what the environmental and energy impacts are.
And despite the governor's concerns about the proposed transmission line, all of this comes at a time when Governor Wes Moore is working to bring more data centers to the state.
Quantum is going to have a remarkable impact on the human condition, and its home is going to be right here in Maryland.
You can't say we're going to bring lots of data centers here for the investment, the jobs, and the whatever without the right infrastructure in place. And it's almost like they don't want to know.
Meaning landowners are still left feeling the consequences.
So it sounds like you're frustrated with state lawmakers and even the governor for even allowing this project to get to this point where we now have to have this federal hearing on whether or not PSEG can access.
And I know everybody throws their hands up. Oh, it's not me, it's not me. But it is me. I mean, it all starts with me.
In Baltimore, Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
Some believe nuclear energy could present a solution to our state's energy crisis. Maryland currently has 1 nuclear power plant, Calvert Cliffs in Calvert County. One expert says nuclear energy could work better to power data centers than other green energy sources.
You know, it's interesting with some of the data economy firms that have historically had policies internally where they committed to purchasing 100% of their power from wind and solar. They've all evolved in the last couple of years because they've realized that their machines run 24/7 around the clock and nuclear plants run 24/7 around the clock. And there really is sort of a peanut butter and jelly type of relationship between these 2 types of technology.
State leaders and lawmakers have tried to officially add nuclear power plants to Maryland's clean energy portfolio as part of Governor Moore's green energy goals. Senator Benjamin Brooks was part of that push, which would allow Maryland to expand its nuclear energy use.
We are net importers. We only generate 60% of the electrons that we consume. We get about 40% of those electrons from 1 nuclear power plant, and that's Calvert Cliffs. If we're going to take 1,300 megawatts offline, then we should be putting 1,300 megawatts online.
Senator Brooks's legislation to try and encourage nuclear energy use stalled and failed in the legislature. Not everyone is on board with nuclear. Maryland's only Republican congressman has indicated he would rather focus on other domestic energy sources, such as natural gas, to address the energy crisis.
We should focus on domestic energy production here in the state of Maryland. We can do it as the president unlocks natural gas production. It's a clean, it's a dependable, and it's a cheap way to produce electricity.
After the break, Kilmar Abrego Garcia takes center stage in the immigration debate following his deportation from Maryland. A closer look at his alleged criminal history in the United States. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man from El Salvador, took the country by storm when he was deported by the federal government in March from right here in Maryland. Several top Democrats have visited El Salvador to fight for Abrego Garcia's return, including Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. And more recently, another Maryland lawmaker traveled to the Central American country, Representative Glenn Ivey. He called the trip a wellness check, arguing Abrego Garcia was denied due process.
What should have happened here was, after he was picked up, he should have been taken to appear before an immigration judge. Probably should have gone back to the judge who was supervising him already, and let them make a decision.
Congressman Ivey says he was denied access to see Abrego Garcia, whose story has captured the attention of the nation. There's been a flurry of action both in court and in the media. I started investigating Abrego Garcia's time in the United States, which stretches back more than a decade. The Trump administration argues Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a member of the notorious MS-13 gang. His family and attorneys say that's not true, and a federal judge here in Maryland ordered the Trump administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return from El Salvador. We obtained this court document showing in 2018 the father of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife's two oldest children filed for an emergency custody hearing because she was, quote, dating a gang member at the time. Fast forward to 2019, when Abrego Garcia was detained in a Hyattsville Home Depot parking lot with 3 other people. He was questioned by police, and this gang sheet says the Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie Abrego Garcia was wearing represents that they are a member in good standing with MS-13. The gang unit in Prince George's County also said a confidential informant indicated Abrego Garcia was a known member. He was not charged with a crime, but was detained in an immigration facility. Abrego Garcia was later released from ICE custody in October, granting a withholding of removal, and a judge said he should not be deported to El Salvador due to gang persecution. In August 2020, Abrego Garcia's wife, Jennifer Vasquez-Sura, filed for a protective order against Abrego Garcia, telling the court he kicked and slapped her. She also said she had a recording of Abrego Garcia saying, "Even if he kills me, no one can do anything to him." She dropped the order about a week later. Then in May 2021, she filed another protective order, again telling the court Abrego Garcia hit her. She again dropped that order, later saying they worked out their problems as a family. We also uncovered in 2022 Abrego Garcia was involved in a Tennessee traffic stop while driving 8 other people in the vehicle. And this body camera video.
You know what you got, right? Huh? You know what you got here, right? No. He's hauling these people for money, is what he's doing. But
shows officers raising concerns about human smuggling.
So he's getting paid to haul these people, probably to Maryland, I would say, if I had my guess.
Abrego Garcia telling the officers the car he was driving belonged to his boss. Fox 45 News confirming it was owned by Jose Ramon Hernandez Reyes, who pled guilty to illegal transportation or moving of an alien in 2020, stemming from a 2019 traffic stop in Mississippi. Politicians have flocked to El Salvador, including Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, making the first trip. While there, meeting with Abrego Garcia. Once returning, Van Hollen arguing the case centers on due process rights.
I am not defending the man. I'm defending the rights of this man to due process.
Attorneys from the Trump administration have said in court documents deporting Abrego Garcia to El Salvador was done in error. The U.S. Supreme Court ordering the administration to facilitate his return to the United States, but the president's borders are...
I think I got plenty of due process. He got more due process than Lakeland Riley got.
Doubts Abrego Garcia will come back to the country, and if he does, he won't stay.
I don't think any court can order another nation, a sovereign nation, to take a citizen national from their country and their custody and get him back to the U.S. The best that could happen for him if he actually gave back to the United States, he would be detained and removed again.
Rallies have been held outside the federal courthouse in Maryland during the latest court hearings. where the federal government maintains it is not sharing details about how it is following orders from the U.S. Supreme Court or the federal courts to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the United States, arguing those details are state secrets. But the federal judge growing impatient, calling the back and forth an exercise in utter frustration. As the court debate continues, all eyes are on the prison in El Salvador where Kilmar Abrego Garcia is being held to see whether he will be released.
Kilmar, if you can hear me, know that the children and I are still fighting for you to come back home.
Or not. That's it for this week's edition of Fox 45 News In Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost.